Be me, Jessica, 34 years old. Teaching 7th grade English at local middle school for 3 years now. Moved here from the city because I thought I could make a real difference. These suburban kids need someone to challenge their narrow worldview. Looking at my classroom of 13-year-old boys know exactly what I need to do. They're at that crucial age where their ideas about manhood are forming. Can already see some of them mimicking their father's behaviors. The aggressive posturing, the dismissive attitudes toward anything soft. One kid, Brandon, literally refuses to read any book with a female protagonist. Another one, Tyler, makes gagging sounds when we discuss emotional themes in literature. This is exactly the problem. Decide to use my position to actually help these boys. Not in the curriculum, but that's fine. Sometimes the most important lessons aren't in any textbook. Start small during our unit on The Outsiders. Classic book about boys and emotions, perfect entry point. Ask the class what they think about the male characters crying in the story. Most of them squirm, look uncomfortable. Crying is for girls, Miss Jessica says Brandon. Here's my moment. Spend the next 40 minutes explaining how that attitude is precisely what's wrong. Tell them about how society conditions boys to suppress their emotions. Explain that this is what we call toxic masculinity. Can see some confused faces, but others are nodding. Good, they're listening. Over the next few weeks, weave it into every lesson. Reading To Kill a Mockingbird becomes a discussion about patriarchal structures. Atticus Finch is heroic, yes, but he's still operating within a male-dominated system. Point out how Scout is punished for being tomboyish by certain characters. Ask the boys why they think society fears girls who act masculine but mocks boys who show any feminine traits. What even are feminine and masculine traits, I ask them. Why do we gender emotions and behaviors? Can see some wheels turning. During our poetry unit, assign them to write about their feelings. Specify that I want vulnerability, not bravado. Some boys complain, say their dads would think this is stupid. Perfect opening. Gather them after class one day. Close the door. I want to talk to you all about something important. Tell them that their fathers grew up in a different time, a time when men didn't know better. Explain that their dads were raised with limited, harmful ideas about manhood. Real strength comes from rejecting those outdated models. Real courage is embracing qualities that society calls feminine. Compassion, emotional openness, gentleness, cooperation over competition. See some boys really engaging now. Tyler raises his hand, asks if this means sports are bad. No, I explain, but the hyper-competitive, aggressive culture around boys' sports often is. It's about why you play, how you treat teammates and opponents. Are you performing masculinity or just being yourself? Start. Bringing in articles I print out. Nothing the school approved, but these kids need exposure to different ideas. Pieces about how gender is a social construct, how the patriarchy hurts everyone, including men, how boys are trapped by expectations just like girls are. Make them journal about times they felt pressured to be a man. The responses are actually heartbreaking. One kid writes about his dad yelling at him for wanting to take art class instead of shop. Another writes about being called slurs for liking musical theater. This is why this work matters. Start using our vocabulary lessons to introduce terms. Patriarchy, hegemonic masculinity, gender performance, heteronormativity. Disguise it as advanced English vocabulary. Technically, these are real terms they might encounter in high school texts. Have them use the words in sentences. The patriarchy affects everyone in our society. Feel like I'm really getting through. Some boys are even checking out books I recommend. Bell hooks, Roxane Gay, made accessible. Articles and essays, nothing too advanced, but enough to plant seeds. Then one day in November, everything falls apart. Kid named John forgets his journal in class. I always tell them the journals are private, just between us. His mother finds it when she comes to pick him up from chess club, flips through it, sees all his entries about rejecting his father's masculinity. One entry where he wrote about how his dad's obsession with him playing football is patriarchal conditioning, using the exact phrases I taught him. Next morning, get called to Principal Robert's office. He's sitting there with John and both his parents. The father is red-faced, looks like he wants to explode. The mother is clutching the journal like evidence. Jessica, John's parents have some concerns about what you've been teaching. Stay calm. I knew this might happen eventually. Explain that I've been trying to give the boys a more complete education. Emotional literacy, critical thinking about social structures. Social structures. The father cuts me off. You've been telling my son that I'm oppressing him, that everything I've taught him about being a man is toxic. Try to clarify that toxic masculinity doesn't mean all masculinity. It's about specific harmful behaviors and expectations. The mother shakes her head. You've been teaching him that gender isn't real, that he should reject everything his father models. Robert looks uncomfortable. Jessica, this isn't part of our English curriculum. Start explaining that good teaching means going beyond the textbook. These boys need tools to understand their world, need to question the systems they're inheriting. The father stands up. I don't pay taxes for you to indoctrinate my son with your political agenda. This is English class. You're supposed to teach grammar and books. Feel my face getting hot. Explain that literature is inherently political. We can't divorce texts from their social context. Examining power structures is part of literary analysis. Not in 7th grade, it isn't, says Robert. He looks tired. Jessica, I'm going to need you to stick to the approved curriculum going forward. Want to argue, but the meeting is clearly over. Think maybe it'll blow over. It does not blow over. Turns out John's mom is friends with Tyler's mom, and Brandon's mom, and half the other moms in the class. Within 3 days, my entire curriculum is being examined. Parents are demanding to see lesson plans, assignments, everything. Some of the boys' journals get shared around. The father phone tree activates. Suddenly, 15 sets of parents are furious. I get emails, dozens of them, accusations of brainwashing, indoctrination, pushing ideology. You're trying to turn our sons into something they're not. You're teaching them to hate themselves for being boys. You're undermining parental authority. Try to respond calmly to each one. Explain the educational value, the research on emotional development, how boys who can access their full emotional range are healthier, happier, how questioning gender norms leads to more authentic self-expression. Most don't even respond to my explanations. The ones who do just get angrier. One dad sends a 5-paragraph essay about how I'm destroying Western civilization. Would be funny if it wasn't so frustrating. Robert calls me in again. The school board has received over 40 complaints. They're demanding a special meeting. I'm being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. You've got to be kidding me. Robert actually looks sympathetic for a moment. Jessica, what were you thinking? These are middle schoolers in a conservative community. You had to know this would explode. Tell him that someone has to challenge these kids' assumptions. Someone has to teach them there are other ways to be, other ways to think about gender and power and themselves. That's not your job, he says quietly. Your job is to teach English. Storm out. Feel betrayed. Spend the next 2 weeks preparing for the school board meeting. Know I need to defend not just myself, but the principals. Gather research studies, articles, educational theory. Practice my statement over and over. The night of the meeting, the school gymnasium is packed. Never seen this many people at a board meeting. Rows of angry parents, mostly fathers, arms crossed. A few mothers who look equally hostile. The school board sits at a long table looking uncomfortable. Robert is there, the superintendent, a couple other administrators. They call the meeting to order. The board chair, a man named Douglas who owns a car dealership, explains the situation, then opens the floor to public comment. First dad who stands up is John's father. My son came home telling me that I'm part of something called the patriarchy, that the way I've raised him is toxic, that he should reject my values and embrace being feminine. This woman has been conducting psychological warfare on our children. Several parents applaud. Another mother stands. I sent my son to school to learn reading and writing, not to be experimented on with radical gender ideology. She's been secretly teaching material we never approved, material that contradicts our family values. More applause. Dad after dad stands up, all saying variations of the same thing. I've overstepped, indoctrinated, pushed an agenda. One father actually calls me a predator. She's targeting vulnerable young boys and trying to confuse them about who they are. That one makes my blood boil. Finally, it's my turn to speak. Stand up. Walk to the microphone they've set up. Hands shaking but voice steady. I understand that many of you are upset, but what I was teaching your sons wasn't radical or dangerous. It was basic emotional literacy and critical thinking. Explain the curriculum I developed, how I used literature to explore gender expectations, how I encouraged boys to examine the messages they receive about manhood. These boys are being raised in a culture that tells them emotions are weakness, that anything associated with femininity is inferior, that their worth is tied to dominance and suppression. Some parents are shaking their heads. Keep going. I was teaching them that these are social constructs, that gender roles are invented, not natural, that the patriarchy, yes, it exists, hurts everyone, including them. Voice getting stronger now. Your sons deserve to know they can be whole people, that they don't have to perform masculinity in rigid, limiting ways, that their father's generation had limited understanding, and that they can choose something better. The room erupts. Parents shouting, several standing. Douglas bangs his gavel. One of the board members, a woman named Patricia, raises her hand. Ms. Jessica, did you get approval for any of this curriculum? Pause. No, I developed it independently. You understand that teachers are required to follow approved materials, especially for controversial topics. I didn't consider it controversial. I considered it educational. Another board member jumps in. You were teaching 7th graders that their fathers are oppressive, that traditional male roles are toxic, without any parental notification or consent? Try to explain the nuance. Toxic masculinity is specific behaviors, not all men. Patriarchy is a system, not individual fathers. But the room isn't interested in nuance. Parent after parent demands my firing. One mother stands up with a petition, over 200 signatures from the community. Our children deserve teachers who respect parental authority, who don't push political agendas, who teach facts, not ideology. Want to scream that everything is political, that choosing to not discuss gender is itself a political choice, that maintaining the status quo is an ideology. But can see, I'm losing this fight. The board deliberates for 20 minutes in a side room. Come back looking grim. Douglas clears his throat. After careful consideration and review of the evidence, the board has determined that Ms. Jessica violated district policy by teaching unapproved curriculum of a sensitive nature, without proper authorization or parental notification. Effective immediately, her employment is terminated. Feel like I've been punched. Knew it was coming, but still. Parents actually cheer. Several stand up clapping. Try one more time. You're making a mistake. These boys need someone to show them a different way. They're being damaged by the narrow definitions you're forcing on them. John's father stands up. My son doesn't need you to save him from me. He needs you to teach him English and stay in your lane. The whole room agrees. Dozens of parents nodding, murmuring approval. Gather my things, walk out of the gymnasium. Can hear the celebration behind me. Spend the next few days in a fog. Calls from the teachers' union, mostly procedural. Might be able to fight the termination, but it'll take months. Do I even want to work in a place like this? Few colleagues reach out, most sympathetic but quiet. Can't risk associating with me too much. One teacher, Amanda, meets me for coffee. I get what you were trying to do. But Jessica, those weren't your kids to experiment on. Bristle at the word experiment. I was educating them. She shakes her head. You were pushing your ideology on captive children, in a community that clearly doesn't share your values, without going through proper channels. Insist that proper channels would never approve what needed to be taught. That's exactly the problem. The system is designed to perpetuate itself. Maybe, says Amanda. But you don't get to unilaterally decide to override parents. That's not how this works. We part awkwardly. Spend a lot of time thinking about what went wrong. My approach was sound. The content was necessary. These boys were learning things that would help them. Was already seeing results before it all imploded. Tyler had started writing poetry. Brandon checked out a book with a female protagonist. Several boys told me they felt less pressure, more free. But then, week 3, after the firing, see something that makes me pause. At the coffee shop, run into John and his dad. Want to leave, but John sees me first. Hi, Miss Jessica. His dad's face hardens, but he nods curtly. John looks happy, animated, talking to his father about some football game, his dad's hand on his shoulder, both of them smiling. They're close, easy with each other. Feel a weird twist in my stomach. Later that week, looking through my old journals from the class, really reading the entries instead of just seeing what I wanted to see. One from Tyler. Miss Jessica says my dad's ideas about men are outdated, but my dad is the smartest person I know. One from Brandon. I don't understand why liking sports is bad. I like sports. Does that make me toxic? One from John. I love my dad, but Miss Jessica says he's part of the problem. Sit with these for a long time. Remember Amanda's words. Those weren't your kids to experiment on. Remember the school board, respect parental authority. Remember that, Father, my son doesn't need you to save him from me. Still believe in everything I taught. Still think toxic masculinity is real and harmful. Still think gender roles are constructed and limiting. Still think the patriarchy exists and damages everyone. But something nags at me. These boys weren't being abused or neglected. Their fathers weren't monsters. They were just regular dads, raising their sons the way they knew how. And I came in and told 13-year-olds that their fathers were wrong, that everything they'd learned at home was oppressive, without ever talking to those fathers, without ever engaging with those families, just assumed I knew better. Get a letter from the district a month later. Formal termination, no severance, black mark on my record. Also get a letter from one parent, a mother. Expecting more anger, but it's different. Dear Jessica, I don't agree with how you went about it, but I want you to know I saw what you were trying to do. My son is sensitive, artistic, and your class was the first time a teacher made him feel okay about that. But you scared him. He came home confused, thinking he had to choose between being himself and loving his father. That's what you got wrong. You made it a war. Some of us are trying to raise good men who are also good humans. We just don't think that requires rejecting everything that came before. I hope you learn from this. Signed, David's mother. Read it 5 times. The phrase that sticks, you made it a war. Did I? In my mind, I was liberating these boys, giving them permission to be more than their limiting culture allowed. But to them, to their families, I was attacking, creating conflict where there didn't need to be, making them choose sides between me and their parents, sit in my apartment unemployed, thinking about this, still angry at the school, the parents, the system, still believe I was right about the concepts. But maybe Amanda had a point. Maybe that dad at the school board had a point. These weren't my children. I had them for 50 minutes a day, 9 months. Their parents had them for life. Who was I to tell them their fathers were the problem? Especially without knowing those fathers, without understanding those families, without any humility about my own limitations. Think about John and his dad at the coffee shop, the obvious love between them. Whatever that father was teaching his son, it wasn't making him miserable. Maybe it wasn't perfect, maybe it was traditionally masculine, but it was working for them. And I tried to blow it up, not because they asked for help, but because I was so sure I knew what they needed. Final twist comes 6 weeks after the firing. Former colleague forwards me an email chain from school. Parents organized a curriculum review committee, demanding more oversight on what teachers can independently add to lessons. New policies requiring approval for any contemporary social topics. Mandatory parent notification for discussions of gender, politics, or family structures. basically locked down anything remotely progressive. My actions didn't open minds, they slammed doors, made it harder for any teacher to have nuanced discussions, gave conservative parents exactly the ammunition they needed. The boys I thought I was helping, now they're in an even more restricted environment, one where teachers are afraid to discuss anything meaningful, where questioning gender norms is explicitly forbidden, where emotional literacy is definitely off the table. I made it worse. Trying to force enlightenment created backlash. Trying to save boys from themselves created rigidity. Trying to do good without permission, without partnership, without humility, backfired completely. Sit with this knowledge. Still believe in the principles. Still think boys need more emotional freedom. Still think gender construction should be examined. But I also see now what I couldn't see then. You can't force people to evolve. You can't tell parents you know their children better than they do. You can't use your position of authority to override family values, even when you're sure those values are wrong, even when you're certain you're helping. That certainty is what got me here, unemployed, blacklisted, and having accomplished nothing, except proving to an entire community that progressive teachers can't be trusted. The man at the school board, John's father. He outsmarted me without even trying. Just by being a good dad, just by actually knowing his son, just by having a relationship I couldn't compete with. I came in with my theories and vocabularies and research, thought that made me right. But he had 13 years of love, of showing up, of knowing John's favorite foods and fears and dreams. And when I forced John to choose, made him feel like loving his dad meant accepting oppression. Of course he chose his father. Of course they all did. I thought I was the enlightened one, the one who could see the system clearly, the one brave enough to teach uncomfortable truths. But I was just another adult using kids to fight my ideological battles. Just another person so convinced of being right that I forgot to listen. And now those boys are back in their English class with a new teacher who sticks strictly to grammar and vocabulary, who would never dream of discussing gender or emotion or social construction, who plays it safe because I showed them what happens when you don't. So I accomplished nothing, except making myself feel righteous for a few months, except confirming every stereotype about progressive teachers those parents believed, except making it harder for the next teacher who actually could have helped. The worst part? Still not sure I'd do it differently. Still think those boys needed what I was teaching. Still think their father's models are limited and limiting. Still think I was right. But being right didn't matter. Being right without wisdom, without strategy, without respect, just made everything worse. That's what I can't forgive myself for. Not being wrong, but being useless. John's dad didn't need arguments or research. He just needed to be there when I wasn't. He just needed to love his son better than I could theorize about him. And that was enough. That's what beat me. Not superior logic or better ideas, just the simple reality that he was John's father and I was just a teacher, who forgot what that meant, who forgot the limits of my role, who forgot that good intentions don't justify overreach. Now I'm looking for jobs in other districts, ones that ask pointed questions about controversial teaching methods, ones that want assurance I'll stick to approved curriculum. And I have to say yes, have to promise I've learned my lesson, have to act like I understand now. Thing is, I do understand, just not the way they think. I understand that I failed, but not for the reasons they believe. I failed because I tried to win, tried to be right instead of effective, tried to change minds through force instead of relationship. Those boys didn't need me to save them. They needed me to teach them English, and maybe, carefully, with permission, with partnership, to help them think about who they want to be. But I couldn't do it carefully, couldn't wait for permission, couldn't build partnership, was too sure, too fast, too convinced. And a man who never argued with me, who never debated feminist theory, who just showed up to the school board meeting and said, "That's my son," beat me completely. because he was right about the thing that mattered most. And I was just right about ideas. Sitting here now, applications scattered on my desk, each one a promise to be smaller, quieter, safer, each one a retreat. And I hate it. But I also earned it. Every bit of it.